Well, it's been a while since I've made a cluster repair video, so let's do one now. Here I have another, what I like to call, I tried to fix it myself and now it doesn't work right cluster. This is another self-repair attempt. And in the email they described it as everything was working except the speedometer. That looks to be correct. Let me just give it some signals here and see what happens. So oh, there we go. Now I should get some. Okay, so that is what's happening. Everything's working but the speedometer. Next, let's open it up and see what we find. I'm also experimenting with microphones, so let me know down in the comments if the audio's improved. I'm trying to step up the quality of the videos a little bit. Okay, so I see new X27s in all locations. Still has the old factory lamp, so I'll have to do something about that. None of the fractured solder joints have been taken care of. And we got some mighty disgusting solder joints. So what happens here is during the removal process, all the pads get ripped off. And in a attempt of desperation, people will just glob tons of solder on there in hopes that it touches the leftover remnants of foil. I'll probably just be starting from scratch with this one. Solder joints are pretty gross. It's always the speedometer that gives people the most trouble. There isn't test points close by, and the traces in foil is just fragile. All these pads are pretty fragile if you're not careful. You see, soldering is pretty easy. See, during my daytime job, we do some production assembly, and we can hire someone right off the street, get them to make nice solder joints within a day. It's desoldering and removing the parts, especially through hole, that even people that have been soldering for 10 years can struggle with removing parts. So this is what happens if you just try to jump in without being prepared, without having the proper maybe a solder sucker tool. Even one of these is better than nothing. All right, so I'm going to start by just undoing everything, starting from the ground up, and just go from there. Alright, so this is what we're left with after the globs have been removed, and started to clean it up a little bit, get the old flux off of there. Now this is what, well, even those pads have been ripped off, so I can't use that as an example, but there's supposed to be copper pads for each of these pins. And what happens here is there's just too much heat, too much pulling, and the pads are lifted from off the board. And yeah, every single pad, there's not a single pad left which it's not the first time I've seen this, but yeah, it's supposed to be like this, so there's copper there for solder to stick to, but we ended up with this. I don't know why they were messing with the trans temp. This cluster doesn't even have trans temp, but yeah, so all right, now I'll be running some jumpers, doing a little cleanup. This cluster has some bad lamps, nothing unusual. It's going to need some solder joints touched up and lots of jumpers. Here I just got to use a little hot glue to help lock in the motors. I'm just putting glue around the little mounting stubs here. I remember one of my older videos, someone said, "Oh, you're not supposed to glue the stepper motors in." Yeah, I know you're not supposed to glue the stepper motors in, but you're also not supposed to pull off all the pads either. See, the solder joints kind of help lock the stepper motor in place. And if these get shifted around or moved or vibrated, or even when I set the needles, or if I have to take the needles off, it could move the stepper motor just enough to break all those new jumpers and solder joints I just put in. So we want to make this as reliable as possible, keep that stepper motor from moving at all. Also, in one of my older videos, someone asked about this wire I use here, this copper colored wire. This is called a magnet wire. It has a thin layer of enamel insulation, which is you can burn off with your soldering iron. That's why on these copper colored wires I kind of hold a little bit more heat on it. And it's okay for these sections to touch each other because the enamel coating is the insulator. This wire here can be found in lots of electromagnetic devices. I actually am reusing the wire I'm using here. This roll here is actually scavenged from an old transformer. With the same wire, it can be found in speakers or relays or electromagnets. So now I'm just gonna give a quick test to all these stepper motors and see how my jumpers are. Now maybe you're thinking about doing this repair yourself. You have a Chevy truck and you want to save some money, and you saw the kits on Amazon and places like that for about 30 bucks. It comes with a solder sucker and soldering iron. And well, if you have experience with soldering, I'd say go ahead and give it a shot. But if you're not 100% sure, confident in yourself, it might end up costing you more money to buy the $30 kit, screw up your cluster, have to send it out and get repaired. A lot of cluster repair shops will charge extra for the work that I just did, like this here. Or actually, a lot of cluster repair shops won't even take them in if you attempted to fix it yourself and screwed it all up. Now, I charge a flat fee. Usually, I don't charge extra for this kind of work, but I'm also more expensive than the usual cluster repair shop. So this one stepper motor here kind of feels like it might have just a little bit of a chunk to it, so I might end up replacing this one. Even though it is an X27, it may have been damaged by the previous owner doing their work. But all the jumpers are good. We have a mile per hour working again. Yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and replace this one. Alright, so I got everything right back up, got the lamps replaced. Calibration is right where it needs to be now instead of all kittywampus. We'll just do a couple sweeps and tests here. Yep, speedometer's working good. The owner of this cluster did send with the lamps that were included with the kit. These are the yellow base lamps. Some of them are good, some of them aren't. There are a lot of crappy lamps out there on the market, especially if you're buying the cheapest ones from the depths of eBay China. I've been burned too many times with crappy lamps, so I only use lamps that I know where they came from. Otherwise, the cheap lamps, usually a couple months in, you get what's called tungsten darkening. You get like this glass reflective layer on the lamp, and it's just crap. So I just careful with buying lamps. Don't buy the cheap, shitty lamps, otherwise you're doing it again in a month. So I guess just to wrap up this video, if you're thinking about rebuilding your own cluster, use some caution. I mean, you really don't want to screw up your cluster. I know a lot of people say, well, it's okay, I'll just go to the junkyard and get another one if I screw up mine. Well, first of all, the chances of finding a junkyard cluster with nothing wrong with it is very slim. It's going to be screwed up some way or another, just the way it is. If the junkyard remanufactures the clusters, they're going to be expensive. They may or may not set your odometer to where it's supposed to be. You don't want to go and throw in a random cluster with a different odometer. I know a lot of people will say, well, it's just an old truck, I don't care, I'm going to drive it until the wheels fall off. That's great and all until you get rear-ended at a stoplight or something, and now you have to explain to somebody else's insurance company, well, look, I know my odometer says I have 250,000 miles, but my truck really has 150,000 miles, so I want to get paid. I want that check for a 150,000 mile truck, not a 250,000 mile truck. So you just don't want to get in a situation like that where your odometer's screwed up and you gotta explain all that. So I think that wraps up this video. We'll do one more reset sweep here. Yeah, she's looking good. It's all ready to go back. Well, hey, thanks for watching.